Why is Qigong done slowly? That is going to be the topic of this episode of Qi Life. So it's one of the things that Qigong practice is best known for, actually. Of course, there's many different ways that we can work with our energy, and so therefore many different types of Qigong practice. But one of the most common types involves moving and breathing with awareness, right? And typically, most of these practices are done slowly. So when people first see someone doing Qigong, or when they first try it for themselves, it's one of the things that really stands out. It's like, slow, and maybe quite a bit slower than other activities or forms of exercise or practice that they might be used to doing. So in this vlog, I'm going to talk about 5 reasons why Qigong is commonly practiced slowly. And then at the end, I'll talk about 2 misconceptions about slowness and Qigong practice. All right, so the first one, not necessarily one of the most core ones, but it's an important one, is safety. Now, if you have some kind of injury, or simply you're doing something that's new and unfamiliar, moving in a way that your body's not used to, if you do that fast to begin with, you're much more prone to some kind of accident or injury. So practicing slowly allows us to work in a way that is safe. Now, that safety then means that our body and our mind is able to relax more easily, our posture is able to open, because naturally the body knows going slowly that it has time to adjust things if it needs to, so it's much less likely to cause any harm to itself, and so the body is able to relax, open up into greater range of motion, and so on. So that's one really useful aspect of why Qigong practices are often done slowly. As I mentioned, maybe not so much at the core of why though. The second reason why, and this one does tie in much more, as a core reason, is awareness. When we practice, when we move slowly, it gives us an opportunity to notice much more detail of what is going on within our body. How little changes in angles and weight distribution and so on affects what's going on within us. And so it becomes a much richer, more nuanced practice when we go slowly and we notice all those little details. The third reason, now some of these reasons are interconnected, right? But it's a little bit different. The third reason is presence. Now, awareness is strongly connected to presence, but there's a little bit more to it than that. And going slowly helps us to develop presence within our practice. This means that we fully inhabit the practice. We're not just aware of what's going on within it, but we allow our body to move fully into whatever position we're doing. This can mean things like allowing the blood to fully flow into the tissues, allowing our nerves to become fully active, allowing our weight to shift its distribution fully within a practice, and so that we really experience it in its true richness. The fourth reason, and again this one's somewhat interconnected, but again a little bit different, is patience. Doing practices slowly helps us to cultivate patience. A lot of this relates to our mind and our approach to the many different things that we have to do in our lives, and sometimes we're always in a hurry, wanting to do the next thing. And when we do that, sometimes we have time constraints. We need to do things quickly. That's fine. Doing things quickly is not quite the same thing as being impatient at doing it. Going slowly naturally helps us to cultivate that patience, to recognize the benefit of taking our time and doing something properly, gaining those other benefits, things like presence, things like awareness, by going slowly. We start to appreciate the value of that and recognize that sometimes things take time and we don't always need to be in a hurry. The fifth reason why Qigong is often done slowly and is because doing practices slowly, and particularly doing movements slowly, helps to build up energy within our body, within our energy system. And often within a Qigong practice, this is one of the benefits that we want to gain from it, building up energy inside our system. And the slowness of the practice helps with this. This relates to some of the things, again, we've already talked about, some of that presence, allowing ourselves time to fully inhabit the practice. And also quite specifically what goes on within our nervous system when we move very slowly. Within Qigong practice, we often do movements that done at a normal speed would be a gross motor movement. Doesn't require a lot of neurological activity because of its simplicity. But when we do this very slowly, it becomes a fine motor movement because we require fine control to do it with such slowness. And this greatly increases the thickness and the strength of those neural pathways and the amount of energy that builds up within the body as a result of doing those movements very slowly. So those are 5 reasons why Qigong practice is often done slowly. I'm sure I could come up with more as well, but it gives a little bit of an insight as to the value of doing Qigong slowly. Now, 2 common misconceptions about the slowness within Qigong. One is that slow does not necessarily mean easy. Now, we talked already about how slowness can really help with safety, and to a certain degree, going more slowly can make things easier to learn, easier to follow, because we have time to observe, be aware, something we talked about as well. But particularly when we get into the type of slowness that builds up energy, the last of the 5 things I talked about, this can actually often be very, very challenging. I was actually talking to someone just a couple of days ago. I met someone here in Vietnam where I am, and we were talking about Qigong, and this person had only tried Qigong once or twice. And he told me about his first experience, and he said he found it so hard, and his legs were shaking because it was done so slowly. And this is one of the things actually with the slow practices. It's actually in many ways often more challenging than doing a practice faster. Now, this principle of slowness, extreme slowness for building up energy, can be applied within many Qigong practices. Within the long white cloud Qigong practices that we do, one of the practices where we specifically really focus on this is the iron shirt Qigong practices. Because for those iron shirt Qigong practices where we build up a lot of physical resilience in the body, that's based on having plenty of energy in the body to work with. And so one of the things we do, right at the start of the iron shirt process is we work to fill the body with energy to a degree that we don't normally fill the body. We sort of, almost overfill it so that we can then condense and work with that energy to make it strong and resilient. All right, so slow doesn't necessarily mean easy, although sometimes it does. And so in terms of that speed, when we're just learning, we often want to find a nice balance. Not going too fast, not making us prone to injury, not making it hard to follow, but also not necessarily going so slowly that becomes a great challenge for us as well. But finding a speed where it's slow enough for us to learn, but it's not too challenging. Okay, second common misconception about slowness within Qigong, and I've kind of hinted at this a little bit by the way that I've talked about some of these aspects, is that not all Qigong is done slowly. There are some Qigong practices that are specifically slow, but then also there are some Qigong practices that are specifically fast. And those maybe aren't practiced as commonly, so people don't observe them as frequently, and so they're not aware of this about Qigong. Whereas slow movement builds up energy, fast movement tends to be really good for releasing energy or simply for increasing the circulation of our energy. And so some practices really specifically focus on this, discharging energy, increasing the circulation. So they tend to be done fast. As I mentioned already, Qigong practices can also be done at a range of speeds. So within the same practice, you might sometimes practice it at a moderate speed, just because it's comfortable, it's good for learning, it's good for experiencing. You might also practice it very slowly for building up energy, and there may also be times using that same movement, that same practice, that you actually choose to do it very quickly as a way to circulate the energy more strongly and to release or discharge excess energy. All right, hopefully that has been interesting, hopefully maybe useful to some of you in your Qigong practice, give you some things to think about and maybe explore within your Qigong practice. I look forward to seeing you on another vlog soon.